Welcome to Incredible Idaho. I'm Jack Hemingway. Each year at this time, we do a special edition of our show, featuring the season's best Incredible Idaho stories. The theme of this year's program is the wonder of our magnificent natural heritage, the wildlife and wild places of Idaho. And what better place to start than with the state's largest resident, the Shiras moose.
They appear awkward and ungainly, rolling their shoulders as they slump along in the perfect imitation of a petulant bully. Long-legged and humpbacked, they've developed a reputation as a belligerent, disagreeable creature. Their stare seems ominous, and their aggressive stance threatening. But for the most part, the Shiras moose is a solitary animal, keeping to himself, and the character flaws attributed to bad temper may simply be the result of his inquisitive nature.
Many people do associate moose with being aggressive. A lot of that, what people interpret as being aggressive, is mere curiosity on the moose's part. An adult moose doesn't have a lot of natural enemies out in the wilds. Now, of course, the calves, as they're growing up, do have things that would eat them. But as they grow older and bigger, there's not much in the woods that's going to challenge an adult moose, and they consequently become very curious.
A creature as large and bulky as a moose can't help but evoke a certain amount of mystique. They spend their summer days lazily feeding, often found camped in the middle of a small pond or marsh. Their huge heads plunge beneath the shallow waters, seeking out the tender vegetation below. By early summer, most of the females have given birth, and like most parents, their main concern is the protection of that calf.
As you'll notice, the cow keeps checking to the right in the brush. The probability is that there is a calf over there. This time of year, the calves are relatively small. They're still totally dependent upon their mother for survival. They're nursing. They don't wean these calves until August and September. So she undoubtedly is showing a little bit of concern, being that she keeps checking over into that area.
By midsummer, when a calf is a little older and stronger, it shadows its mother, rarely leaving her side. Except for its color, the calf looks much like a miniature adult with elongated legs and a small hump to its back. As it matures, it will gradually turn from a reddish-brown to the darker color of an adult. Their coats are made up of brittle, hollow hairs that provide insulation in the winter. But in the summer, the dense black coat can be a burden.
They need the protection from the bugs and from the heat, because they are a big black animal and they do draw a lot of heat in their system. So they like the heavy, thick, boggy bottoms where they can get out of the hot weather and get into some mud to roll in and get rid of some of the mosquitoes.
During the colder months, when deer and elk seek out the milder temperatures of lower elevations, the rough, insulating coat of the moose allows this hardy creature to winter in some fairly severe areas. Long legs make it possible for the moose to reach the tender shoots and branches of willows that make up its winter diet. This adaptation also helps it to plow through soft, feathery snow, or trot almost gracefully across frozen, ice-locked rivers with a speed that seems out of character. It's rare to see more than one moose feeding in an area. When two are found together, it's usually a cow and a calf. This smaller animal is probably last year's offspring. Although almost full size, the young female will follow her mother until early June, when the cow will give birth to a new calf and abandon last year's offspring. By that time, the barren expanse of ice and snow will have yielded to the plentiful, lush green of summer. And amid the abundant browse of the growing season, it doesn't take long for the young moose to adapt to a life away from the protective care of its mother.
This is a young male, probably a yearling, growing his very first set of antlers. He has yet to acquire the bulky, muscular frame of a big bull, but he's already developed the intense curiosity of his species. His knobby, immature antlers aren't very impressive now, but he has the potential to someday display a spectacular rack that can weigh up to 40 pounds. Moose shed their antlers in the early winter, only to begin immediately growing another set. By September, the velvet will be completely rubbed off and the massive antlers will emerge hard and polished, ready for the challenge of the breeding season. But during the summer months, when the antlers are still encased in delicate tissue, the big bulls exercise caution.
A moose that would have a severe accident on one of these antlers would stand the possibility of bleeding to death. And so they're very reclusive. They're not aggressive at all, and they tend to stay hidden and do as little as possible. The energy that it takes to grow these antlers is tremendous.
Few can match the majesty of a big bull moose. He's a symbol of nobility and splendor. And somehow his somber dignity defines all that's romantic and magnificent. His solitary ways and baleful stare reminds us that we are intruders in his world, a guest in the wild places he inhabits. But it also reminds us that as long as we respect the wild creatures of this earth, we too can enjoy places of peace and solitude that are the heritage of all creatures. The Shira's moose is so well adapted that healthy populations can be found just about everywhere in our state. But the same isn't true of all species of wildlife. Man's encroachment on the environment has taken a toll on wildlife. Many Idaho species, such as the salmon and caribou, have become listed as endangered under the Federal Endangered Species Act. There are others that biologists fear may be in danger of extinction, but often there's too little known about them, or the animal is simply too elusive to be able to get a handle on them. One such creature is the mysterious wolverine. Idaho's imposing Sawtooth Mountains stand as a vigilant guard over the wolverine's territory. They harbor a legend, a creature who's been painted as an evil scavenger throughout the centuries by folklore and myth. But like most tales handed down through the ages, fable has far outgrown fact. Today, scientists are beginning to strip away the mystery and learn more about the needs of this reclusive animal. During the winter of 1992, the first phase of a wolverine study was launched by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game and the U.S. Forest Service.
Biologists had set up a number of barrel traps like this, baited with roadkill deer, to lure the animals into the metal drum. The plan was to drug the creature and then radio collar it so scientists could follow the animal's movements. It was a frustrating experience. Although they regularly discovered tracks near the traps, throughout the winter only 3 wolverines were actually captured. Since then, 1 adult female slipped her radio collar and an elderly animal died, leaving only 1 wolverine left to monitor.
But this past year, a change in trap design, and perhaps in luck as well, dramatically increased the sample size. Last winter, 9 wolverines were captured, 6 in 1 week.
This guy's pretty aggressive, but I don't know. I don't know how he's going to be with all these people around.
Late the day before, research biologist Jeff Copeland discovered that 2 of the traps were vibrating with the low, distinct growl of captured wolverines. Since these thick-necked animals seem to easily slip out of the radio collars, this year, scientists are marking them with implants, small radio transmitters that are surgically placed in the wolverine's abdominal cavity.
Okay, when we opened this yesterday, he just hit the front of it. He about took the best hat. So,
Okay, well, let's do this then. You keep him over this way. If you can give me a shoulder or rear end, boom, I'm in.
Dave Hunter is a wildlife veterinarian. He's been called in to perform this delicate surgery in these less than ideal conditions. A hypodermic needle containing an immobilizing drug is attached to a long jab stick. When everything is ready, the roof of the trap is eased up and the scientists place a screen across the entrance. Jeff lights the interior of the trap with a flashlight, while Dave tries to poke the animal with the drug.
you get him?
Got him.
Okay, down.
The traps look like miniature log cabins buried in the snow. Inside is a carcass hooked to a trigger. When the wolverine begins pulling on the meat, down comes the heavy roof and the animal is captured in a natural den.
We try to hang it so it's...
Around the trap site, roadkill deer and spawned-out fish hang from the trees. The scent of their rotting flesh further entices the animal to the site.
The wolverine is what they call a candidate species for threatened and endangered status, which basically means we don't know much about them. And this is a good opportunity to kind of get ahead of the game rather than waiting until maybe their numbers are reduced or their habitat is reduced to the point where they have to become listed as endangered.
A small camp table serves as the operating theater. Heat packs are placed under the animal and her claws are safely secured with ropes.
Okay, right now we're just shaving up the hair, and we're trying to keep the shaved area as small as possible.
The wolverine is one of the largest members of the weasel or mustelid family. A characteristic all mustelids share is well-developed scent glands that emit a musky odor, a trait even more obvious in its cousin, the skunk.
And so we're going to go make a nice little incision here.
Every precaution is taken to avoid infection. An antibiotic has been administered to the animal, and all the instruments and the transmitter itself are handled only with sterile gloves.
Now, if you guys can see, here's the intestinal tract, stomach. Up here we'll get a piece of liver, come around, and here's the transmitter. Lays off to one side, just behind the kidney. The kidney sits right there. It floats free in the peritoneal cavity, and it absolutely causes no problems.
The radio transmitter is already sending out a strong signal that should last for 2 years, allowing biologists to track her movements from the air and on the ground as she grows into a sexually mature adult.
Her teeth are very sharp, very young-looking teeth. Her canines are fairly pointed. The incisors are sharp. She's a young animal, and just in the size. She's probably right at a year old.
In any wildlife population, age structure is important. A diversity of animals, in this case, older adults, juveniles, and kits, is one sign of a healthy population.
So finding these young animals is tremendous. It tells us that there's reproduction going on here. You know, the animals are making a living here. So just being able to catch this number of animals, 5 of these wolverines we caught within 2 miles of each other. And we've got everything from adult male, adult female, yearling or juvenile animals. One of the females is pregnant, so it's a tremendous opportunity to learn some things about just the basic population characteristics of this little group of wolverines here.
The wolverine is placed back into the safety of the trap to sleep off the effects of the drug. 2 hours later, she's released, darting quickly out of sight. About 2 miles away at the second trap, the researchers discover a feisty one.
Here he comes. They are a ferocious animal. You know, they're a tenacious animal. Down. Sure. Whoa! Oh, he's a beauty. That is beautiful.
Oh, he's gigantic.
We're learning that they're an aggressive nature probably benefits them or better enables them to live in the type of country that they live in.
He's a 29-pound adult male. Never expecting to catch 6 wolverines in 1 week, the biologists have temporarily run out of implants, so this fellow is fitted with a radio collar. Even tranquilized, the animal emits a low rumbling sound that is incredibly powerful.
This is a lethal weapon, isn't it? Okay, buddy, you and me, we're going in.
Later, when the drug is worn off, the trap is opened, and the full effects of that snarl can be felt.
How you doing, buddy?
It's a chilling sound, but almost humbling at the same time, reminding us somehow of the need to preserve these primitive places. So this savage song of the wolverine will never be lost.
If anyone ever asked me what wilderness sounds like, you know, I'd have to say you got to hear this, because it's just an absolutely incredible sound.
Our natural world is a complex one. The lowliest of Earth's creatures are firmly joined to the loftiest by an intricate food chain. Take away one link, and the whole thing can be in danger of collapse. Last winter, my daughter Margot brought you a story about the strong bond that's been forged over the ages between the kokanee salmon and the bald eagle, on the snowy shores of Lake Pend Oreille.
The winter landscape has a harsh, austere beauty, almost as if nature, in a desperate bid to conserve warmth, has narrowed its colors to stark shades of black and white. The cold penetrates, slowing movements and muffling sounds. It creeps up the mountainside, lingering among the trees and obscuring the peaks in an icy fog. The struggle for survival takes on an eerie quiet that has its own peculiar intensity. To waste energy in this frigid land is to court death. The strong will endure. The rest are destined to surrender to the unforgiving law of nature, survival of the fittest. But this seemingly hostile environment somehow supports life. A pair of mergansers burst suddenly into movement, orchestrating a flyby in perfect formation. Perched midstream in the icy creek, a strange little bird called a dipper performs a bizarre, bouncing dance. Near the mouth of the stream, gulls gather, their dull plumage blending perfectly into this world shaded in gray, and high in the trees, bald eagles survey the shoreline, searching for kokanee salmon.
The kokanee is the basic forage fish in this lake. Everything is dependent on the kokanee. The eagles are here because the kokanee are here, and it seems the more kokanee we have, the more eagles have shown up.
Sometime near the end of October, the kokanee salmon begin their spawning run. During the next 2 months, thousands journey to the mouth of Granite Creek, seeking out the fast-moving waters upstream to lay their eggs. Mysteriously, the eagles know that prey will be plentiful, and within a few days they quietly appear to settle in the pines above the creek and begin their silent vigil.
We've seen as many as up to 250 eagles here at one time. Right this year, we've only seen about 3 dozen to about 50, something like that.
Fisheries biologist Bruce Thompson has kept tabs on the bald eagles here for 10 years. 3 mornings a week during the kokanee run, he brings a crew of biologists and volunteers across the chilly waters of Lake Pend Oreille to Granite Creek. They come to collect eggs from the kokanee salmon for Fish and Game's hatchery program.
What they do is swim upstream this time of year to try to find a place to spawn, and this fish trap blocks the entire creek. They're trying so hard to find their way upstream, they'll swim across this weir back and forth until they find the openings we've left for them. And they continue on into the trap.
When the kokanee are ready to spawn, their colors begin changing from a silvery fish to bright red. They are cousins to the sockeye salmon, and at one time made the same long journey to the ocean and back. Then glaciers moved in, cutting off their route to the sea. But the kokanee salmon learned to adapt to fresh water, and over the centuries, lost the urge to migrate. Biologists call this residualization. Now they are a vital link in the food chain of the big northern lakes.
Put that lead line down and just slide along it with your foot.
The trapped fish are collected using a seine net, which can sometimes be a tricky business.
Hang on, I'm not on the lead line. Okay, bring it up.
From the seine net, they're transferred to a holding tank. A concentration of tranquilizer has been mixed into the water to calm the fish. This protects the fish from internal damage and also makes them a bit easier for biologists to handle.
This is a green female. You put some gentle pressure on the front end of the eggs there. You can see that there's no eggs coming out. So we go ahead and keep them in what we call a green pen, and we just leave them in there until we're done, and then we'll release them back into the creek. In a couple days, they should be mature, and we can take the eggs from them then.
Those females that are ripe are gently squeezed and bright red eggs drop into a bowl. Sperm from a male is added to fertilize the eggs. Most of these adults began life the same way. The fertilized eggs are transferred from here to Cabinet Gorge Fish Hatchery to be raised to a 2-inch fish. The tiny kokanee are then brought back and planted into the waters of Granite Creek. Eventually, they find their way downstreams to Lake Pend Oreille. 2 to 4 years later, the adult fish returns once more to the waters of their youth. They spawn and die, leaving a legacy of eggs to carry on the species, and the cycle begins again.
Well, this is a spawned out female kokanee. She dropped her eggs before she got to the trap. Her belly's all thin and flabby. And she's also been grabbed possibly by one of the bald eagles that are sitting downstream. We'll release her back into the creek where the other fish respawn. She'll probably end up in front of an eagle again before the day's out, and that's how the life cycle ends around here.
It's not just the wintering bald eagles that rely on kokanee for food. They are a critical part of the food chain in Lake Pend Oreille.
The bull trout and the Girard kamloops, the big Girard trophy kamloop here in the lake, are really dependent on the kokanee population. And that's why we're very concerned about making sure we have good reproduction at the hatchery, good survival at the hatchery, so we can have a good population of kokanee here in the lake.
For the communities on the lake, a healthy kokanee population also translates into a strong economy. Sport fishing and tourism is a big business here in the summer. But in the winter, it can be a quiet place, a place where nature rules. One of the strong sweeps down to capture the weak, gliding out gracefully over the gray water with its kill. It is war, a struggle to survive, and the story of the battle is written in the snow. The hushed stillness returns and nature pushes on. Down below, the kokanee salmon continue their struggle upstream to spawn. And high above in the pines, bald eagles keep a silent watch.
It's not only man who has the power to wreak havoc on the wild places and wildlife of Idaho. For 7 long years, a drought has been strangling the state in its devastating embrace. But finally, last summer, nature seemed to relax her brutal grip. The high country began to shed its icy snows, and mountain streams long choked with dust began to flow. The earth rejoices in an explosion of color. Lush greens, brilliant yellows, splashes of vivid red. Colors that seem so true and so rich, they can only come from nature's palette. But most incredible of all is an endless field of lavender blue, an extraordinary shade that changes hues as it nods and waves in the wind. Water has restored the land, and the marsh celebrates in an extravagant riot of color. Historically, this stretch of Idaho has been known as the Camas Prairie, named for the prolific lavender blue camas blooms that carpet the valley in the springtime. Towering to the north are the snowy peaks of the Soldier and Smoky Mountains. To the south lie the rolling Bennett Hills. In 1987, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game established a wildlife management area here in cooperation with Ducks Unlimited and the Nature Conservancy. Our state's hunters contributed funding through the purchase of the Idaho waterfowl stamp. In the midst of the prairie, 3,000 acres was set aside for wildlife and named Centennial Marsh in honor of Idaho's first 100 years.
And we have a pretty good population of non-game species like the sandhills, the avocets, the curlews, the willets, the yellowlegs, and the phalaropes. And there's a lot of birds that use this marsh and depend on this marsh.
Habitat biologist Terry Gregory is the caretaker of Centennial Marsh. The hope was that the wetland would provide vital nesting habitat for waterfowl, especially ducks, a species hard hit by habitat loss and drought. But in past years, the demand on the water table for irrigation, combined with the effects of drought, have left the marsh high and dry by early summer, the most critical time to have water if newly hatched ducklings are going to survive. To resolve the problem, Terry has constructed a series of ponds connected to a well by a pipeline and ditch system. And surrounding the ponds, he's planted high, sturdy grasses, perfect nesting cover for waterfowl.
I feel like, yes, we have more birds here than we've had in the past, so I think it is working. I think the birds will continue to come, and once we get that tradition established again, that the birds have a place to come to, the population will increase, so that's our goal.
nature has joined the struggle, bestowing the gift of a wet, snowy winter to feed the depleted water table. And then, as if that were not enough, in a burst of fanfare, she blankets the prairie in an achingly beautiful blue, a profusion of color that hasn't been seen in such abundance for 30 years. The root of this bright flower is a large, round bulb that has a high starch content. Before the white man settled the prairie, Native Americans, the Shoshone, Bannock, and Blackfoot tribes, would migrate to this area by the thousands each spring to gather the camas root for food.
And they really depended on this. It was one of their staples to get them through the winter. They would roast it and then grind it, dry it, grind it into a flour, and then make a cake out of it, a small cake.
Now the prairie provides for the wildlife, furnishing food and shelter to an amazing variety of birds.
I guess I'd like to think that I'm just making things better here than they were. I enjoy the birds. I enjoy the people being able to see the birds.
A quiet sense of peace envelops the marsh. Time slows and then is forgotten as visitors and residents alike conform to the ancient rhythm of nature. A phalarope, sometimes pronounced phalarope, skims along, a small sandpiper-like bird that seems constantly in motion, rapidly dabbing its bill as it feeds. Stalking gracefully through the higher grasses is a willet, a rather nondescript gray-brown bird that's a cousin to the brighter phalarope. The low, steady hum of the marsh is interrupted by a sandhill crane singing out a warning with her peculiar call. We've stumbled across her secret, 2 large eggs perched on a flat platform of a nest made of dried grasses. She, in turn, invades the territory of a blackbird, who becomes agitated and begins to harass the larger bird in an almost comical show of aggression that seems to have little effect on the plodding pace of the sandhill. A pair of striking black, white, and tan patterned birds search the shallows, feeding on aquatic insects, seeds, and small crustaceans. The American avocet is easily recognized by its slender, upturned bill and distinctive plumage. Author and conservationist Aldo Leopold writes eloquently in his book, The Sand County Almanac, of his hope that a wildlife legacy be preserved to pass on to his 3 sons. He writes, "I hope to leave them good health, an education, and possibly even a competence. But what are they going to do with these things if there be no more deer in the hills, and no more quail in the coverts, no more snipe whistling in the meadow, no more piping of widgeons and chattering of teal as darkness covers the marshes, no more whistling of swift wings when the morning star pales in the east, and when the dawn wind stirs through the ancient cottonwoods and the gray light steals down from the hills over the old river sliding softly past its wide brown sandbars, what if there be no more goose music?" Aldo Leopold's legacy remains alive in the wonder of Centennial Marsh, a magical place where the music can still be heard. A wilderness is hereby recognized as an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. This oft-quoted excerpt from the Wilderness Act of 1964 reflects the values Americans place on their wild places. In Idaho, we're blessed with a plethora of wild places, rugged, primitive country that pulls at something mysterious in our souls. Its value cannot be measured by the traditional methods of man. For in the words of Chief Seattle of the Snohomish tribe, how can you buy or sell the sky, the warmth of the land?
Ansel Adams, the famous photographer who captured the magnificence of the nation's wilderness in his stunning photographs, wrote eloquently of preserving America's wild places. He writes, "You must have certain areas of the world left as close to primal condition as possible. You must have quietness and a certain amount of solitude. You must be able to touch the living rock, drink the pure waters, scan the great vistas, sleep under the stars, and awaken to the cool dawn wind. Such experiences are the heritage of all people." Perhaps no one feels that sentiment more strongly than the folks charged with the responsibility to preserve the wild animals and wild places that remain. For conservation officers Lynn Merrill and Joe Curry, that means working the mountains and rivers of Idaho's spectacular backcountry.
You ready? Shouldn't take a few hours to get up in here. I first started into fish and game work because I thought I would have an opportunity to spend a lot of time with wildlife. Fortunately, that hope has come true for the most part. Throughout the year, I spend time with big game, small game, fish, predators on occasion, and of course, I deal with the people that are also involved with those animals. As a conservation officer, my role is to preserve and protect the wildlife, and I do that by making sure that people treat the wildlife with respect, follow and obey all the rules of the state of Idaho. So I enjoy my job because I have an opportunity to do just what our preamble says, and that is preserve and protect wildlife for the people within the state of Idaho. And that's one of the things that's real important for all of us to remember, is that the wildlife within the state belongs to all of the people for the enjoyment of everyone. Yeah.
Wildlife needs habitat to survive. That means food, water, shelter, and space. Presently in Idaho, we have 3.8 million acres of designated wilderness. That is, land permanently set aside in its natural state by the Federal Wilderness Act of 1964. In addition, our state boasts another 11 million acres of roadless land, all areas that meet the habitat requirements of wildlife. But for the men and women who work to preserve and protect our wildlife, these vast reaches of backcountry can prove quite a challenge.
You know, we had a situation here a couple years ago where a fellow got in some elk over here and shot a few more than he was supposed to, left most of them there to rot. We were able to make contact with the gentleman and take care of that situation. In the summertime, when we spend time in these areas for several reasons, which include monitoring what's happening with the wildlife populations, the movements, what's occurring in the habitat, watching for things that might be destructive in nature or positive in nature. We make contacts with public that are up here utilizing the areas to either help them out or to see that they're obeying the laws and that everything's going according to Hoyle. Looks like got more elk beds all over the ridge here.
This area of eastern Idaho is known as Poker Peak, a lush paradise that begins gently along the shoreline of Palisades Reservoir and stretches to the snowy crown of Caribou Mountain. Summer is in its full glory. The cool green forest glades yield to spectacular mountain meadows blanketed in a profusion of wildflowers. Lavender blue lupine, the daisy-like balsam root, bright red Indian paintbrush, the delicate pale bloom of phlox, snowbrush, serviceberry, chokecherry. Native plants not only pleasing to our senses, but important components of habitat for the many wildlife species that make this area their home.
Oh, you're talking a myriad of animals here. As far as the game species, we're talking deer, elk, moose, bear. There's a variety of non-game species. We have predators, a lot of songbirds. There's just a tremendous amount of diversity up here in wildlife.
Poker Peak, along with neighboring areas Bear Creek, Caribou, and the Palisades, are all candidates for wilderness designation. Places set aside in their natural state for future generations to enjoy. It seems, as daily life becomes more complicated, people have a need to seek out the solitude and peace that wilderness offers.
Oh, I think about everything when I'm up here. I think about my family, the future, the past. I think about the little birds flying around. Basically, I try to mentally relax when I'm up here. I see a real need for this type of a country to exist and to remain. People are clamoring from the cities to have an experience back in country like this all the time. And there's a real demand from the public to simply be back here. They enjoy it. They enjoy the solitude themselves.
In a number of states, such as our neighbors, Oregon and Washington, the demand has become so insistent that access has been limited to wilderness areas. So far in Idaho, aside from requiring permits to float on our wilderness rivers, we've managed to forestall any restrictions, but the real battle remains.
My concern is that if many of the proposed wilderness areas are not kept as the way they are now, man will have a tendency to take the last merchantable timber in the draws and make a road up to the peak to drill an oil well or see what kind of mineral might be in the ground. And obviously there's a time and a place for all the things that man requires. We need to build homes, and we need to have roads, we need to have places to buy our groceries. And that's fine, but those places need not to be here, and they don't need to be everywhere. We can maybe keep a bit of what we like to think America once was and allow an opportunity for our children and our children's children to come in and see that very thing, what once was, because we don't have much of it left.
Traveling into the remote backcountry of Idaho to enjoy its wildlife and wild places can prove quite a challenge. To many folks, it presents an opportunity to go beyond the traditional methods of horsepacking and backpacking.
That's a boy. Come on, Yoder. That's a boy. Come on, Ralph. That's it. Good job, guys. That's a way.
Visions of Heidi in the Swiss Alps conflict with the austere beauty of Idaho's Owyhee desert country. But backcountry traveler Steve Silva has managed to blend the two in perfect harmony with his 3 French alpine pack goats.
What we've got wooden pack saddles, just like a horse, but a scaled down version. And they have a cinch strap, a breast strap, and a rump strap. So use a saddle pad and a pretty normal arrangement, and then just hang panniers on the goats. Whoa.
If you've ever been around someone loading up a mule train, you may remember it as a long, drawn-out process with the potential to become a bit of a rodeo. Not so with Steve's goats.
He's sucking in air on
Although
me.
they're just kids, only a little over a year old, the goats are bred to be pack animals and take to it like the proverbial fish to water.
They're only about halfway grown. They weigh about 125 pounds maybe.
No?
Yeah.
Really?
And they'll get to be about 210 to 250 pounds. I'm sorry, guys. Come on, goat.
At this point, they can carry about 30 pounds each. But by the time they're full grown, they can haul up to 60 pounds.
Isn't this beautiful? Look at this big rock right here. Come on, boys.
The goats follow Steve like small puppies. When they're first born, the kids are taken from the female and hand-fed by their new owner. They become what biologists term imprinted on a human. Wherever Steve leads, they will cheerfully follow. Steve first began looking into pack animals when he and his wife Jan had their first daughter, 3-year-old Kelsey. They both loved the outdoors and didn't want a young family to curtail their treks into Idaho's backcountry. He decided horses and mules required too much maintenance and llamas proved too expensive. Then Steve heard about John Monzinski
a botanist in Wyoming who pioneered goat packing by using them to carry research gear into the mountains. Now the botanist has become a businessman, breeding and raising the animals and running an outfitting service with a string of pack goats. Steve took a trip to Wyoming to check it out and returned a convert, with Yoder, Mike, and Ralph in tow.
And so now the way it's growing so much, John really wanted me to help him educate people, and I want my own string for hunting and fishing. That's what we like to do, is go fishing up in the alpine country. And you can't get a horse into the lakes we go fishing to. That's pretty much impossible because of the talus. And llamas might work, but once again, I just couldn't do it. And these goats are like, they just cruised. They went everywhere we wanted to go.
When Steve says everywhere, he means everywhere.
Come on, guys, let's show those llamas where you can go.
The goats have little impact on the environment, treading lightly and nibbling on the brush, rather than eating a plant down to its roots. The only concern among goat packers is that folks go to a reputable breeder for their animal, so they aren't shortchanged in quality, perhaps discovering down the line that they bought a dairy goat instead of a pack goat.
Come on, goats, follow us!
Here in Idaho, I mean, we have got it. This is perfect goat country. We have this is unlimited. We can go anywhere we want, and here's an animal that's logical and practical and economical. And the variety of where they can go, we just got it made.
Come on, goats.
Come on, goats. That's right. It's about time to go.
Perhaps one of the most romantic means of backcountry travel is by dog sled, a method popularized by Jack London's stories of the far-frozen Alaskan wilderness. Just the sound alone evokes a strange sense of longing. There's something incredibly romantic and yet starkly primitive about that long, drawn-out howl.
Okay, Sika dog. Come on, girl, let's go. Let's go. Come on. Let's go, Sika. Come on, you old lady. Come on, good dog.
Modern-day mushers John and Colleen Marzluff encounter the ghosts of that romance and adventure each time they hitch up their team.
You get that feel when you're out there. It's really, especially when you're the first one out on a trail, you really feel like you're breaking new ground, and you can, really romanticize and think of exploring the great Arctic. And Sika dog's ready.
Not that much has changed. Harnesses are brightly colored synthetic instead of leather or sinew, and sleds have become more lightweight. But the basics remain the same, especially the dogs and their relationship with their masters.
I like the idea of a breed of dog like Siberian Huskies being used for what they were originally bred for, what they originally established, that domestication and that relationship between man and dog.
These dogs just naturally take to running. They love to run more than anything. They really, really enjoy getting out and just running full blast.
An excited Scout is matched up with Kenai, forming the lead pair of a dog team of 6.
You want your enthusiasm and brains up front to keep everybody else moving and go in the right direction. Hike!
That's right, hike, not mush. John says that only Hollywood uses the word mush. The real commands are actually borrowed from oxen teams.
Ha over, Kenai, hike!
Haw for left, gee for right. And that all-important command, whoa.
I gotta untangle, Wiley. Whoa, whoa, stay.
The Marzluffs began dog sledding as a way to exercise their family dogs. Over the years, that activity has grown to include 5 more dogs. Dog sled racing, dog shows, teaching dog sled classes, and ski joring, a popular sport in Europe that's just beginning to catch on in the United States.
Anybody can do it. You get a good harness and you get a good line and a padded hip pack, and off you go.
Good dog.
To me, it's the ultimate. If you have one dog and you're really interested in the sport and doing something to work the dog, it's an ideal thing to do.
It's a great way to explore the outdoors in a quiet fashion. Doesn't use any energy. And it's, you really feel more connected, I think, with the outdoors. You're actually part of the environment like this instead of just blowing through it.
I'm by, Corey, I'm by.
Come by, Kenai.
I'm by.
It's a great way to see wildlife. Wildlife reacts to these animals a lot like they do to a pack of wolves. And so you can sneak up on a feeding group of eagles and ravens at a carcass and really get a good close look, whereas they'd be scared off
miles ahead with a snowmobile.
Come by. Good job.
Dog sledding isn't exactly the easy, relaxing ride you might expect.
Atta boy.
John is continually on the alert, shifting his weight to guide the sled into turns and constantly shouting words of encouragement to the dogs.
Good luck, Corey! The Musher's really the seventh dog on a 6-dog team. And you pedal by kicking just like you do in cross-country skiing. Sometimes you have to get off and run. Come on, guys, hug! Good dogs. Got to help the dogs out so you don't discourage them.
In Jack London's best-loved story, The Call of the Wild, a sled dog named Buck eventually abandons the harness to run wild with the wolves. It seems his legacy still lingers today, caught up in the romance and adventure of the modern-day mushers and their hauntingly magnificent dogs.
Look at them. I mean, they look like wolves. You want to see them out here in the snow. You want to see them having a good time, and that's why we enjoy it so much, because they do.
As we close our show, we leave you with the exuberant mating dance of the Colombian sharp-tailed grouse.